Hello, I'm Greg Rowe with the Paranormal Study Center. I have with me Adrianna Larkin. She's an author, songwriter, and performer. She's also doing life coaching, and her topic today is going to be Igniting the Sacred Fire. I have the book here and the CD, all about reinventing yourself at any age. Adrianna, welcome to Huntsville, Alabama.
Thank you so much.
Good to have you here. Tell us just briefly how you got into the process of reinvention and were able to look at it as a process that others could buy into and use.
Well, my own reinvention came about as a source of some personal crisis, not uncommon for many people. But through the course of that, I've learned that there are some common steps and some common barriers and some common things that actually ease the process. So what I did was I examined my own story to learn from it and then begin to develop some common tools that people could use going forward to spark their own reinvention. When I underwent my experience, mine was such that I finally stepped into a career and a life of my choosing that I had desired for many, many years. And it was in the midst of a bankruptcy, a foreclosure on my home, and dual unemployment. My husband and I were both unemployed. You could say that we were byproducts of the current economic climate and that we had a small family business that was doing quite well. We were poised actually for expansion, and like so many people in that position, we were relying on outside sources to do that, investors and the banking industry. And when the market began its collapse and many people lost a lot of their reserves, we were affected by that.
So, in a way, reinvention was kind of forced on you. You had to learn it the hard way.
I did, but that's what I wanted people to understand, that we don't have to have the harshest of circumstances. We can do this by choice instead of default.
So it's probably better for a person coming into midlife, becoming an empty nester, getting out of the military and having to readjust to civilian life, or whatever, undergoing a divorce, whatever the situation they're going through in life, whatever the life-changing circumstances, to do it proactively rather than wait until they feel that the change is being forced on them.
Exactly. And what it helps to understand is that when things leave us or we incur dramatic change, that's usually a catalyst for something else. People tend to view loss as an exit of something. And what I invite people to consider is that while something has left, the space that remains holds space for possibility in something else.
Well, that reminds me of some ancient pagan wisdom. The Greeks said when they used the term dilemma, it meant the two horns. So what we in English modern terms say dilemma, we think of something very negative. They just meant it was a passage space between two horns. You could pass between the horns of a dilemma and move on to something better. And I think that's what you're saying, that anytime there is a loss, it is an opening for a future gain.
Absolutely. And there are, you mentioned that culture is espousing that, but you can find that in many cultures. The Chinese symbol for crisis actually incurs an element of opportunity. You know, likewise, I believe, and I'm very limited knowledge in this, I wouldn't profess to be an expert in anybody's sense of the imagination, but I believe that Hindus often look at fire as a cleansing process to bring forth rebirth.
Well, certainly the Kali Yuga cleanses the world for a regeneration.
Exactly.
Same way in the Norse cycle, Ragnarok does the same thing, It's only cyclic. There's no linear apocalypse in the pagan faiths. There's no call to judgment. There's simply an end bringing about a new beginning. And I guess in the personal life, in the microcosm, we encounter the same thing.
Exactly. And what I hope people will understand is that if they're facing a loss or a crisis or sometimes it manifests itself as a stagnation, a stopping point where they're being forced to sit in idle for a while, that this is a doorway. This is a key. It's an entry into something greater. If they are not sensing that loss, if they're in a process right now that doesn't present as anything like that, they're going through their lessons, acquiring knowledge, acquiring transferable skills, becoming aware of innate opportunities.
Now you say this with retrospect. At the time, did it feel that way, or did it feel like, this is awful?
A very good question. Thank you for asking that. I had that awful experience preceding the business failure. In fact, that's what started my personal growth, and that actually, I think, helped to temper some of the things about those losses by the time they showed up. Funny thing is, I had purchased a custom frame shop, an art gallery with my husband. We were viewing this as our exit from corporate America. We were very excited. We had finally landed in a true passion of ours, which was supporting art in the community. And it seemed like something that should have been the culmination of a dream. But coming from a family of business owners, entrepreneurs who had at different points suffered other losses, I had a lot of fear around this. And my fear actually grew to the point where it was becoming manifested as physical symptoms. I suffered chest pain, I was having anxiety attacks. All the while my business was growing beautifully. You know, sometimes what I think it helps to understand is the very best of circumstances don't necessarily make us happy. And then conversely, once we look at that, we can look at the very worst of circumstances as an opportunity. It was the tension that I felt in owning a small family business that moved me forward towards personal growth, because I realized that I had this unrealistic fear around everything falling apart, and that if that happened, if I wasn't prepared for it, I probably wouldn't live through the experience. And the same token, if the business was going to be a success, I had to learn how to enjoy it. Yeah. So I started on that personal growth path, and it was probably 2 years of meditation, intense study, reading, and I started to see certain themes come up. And when everything, I guess, started to circle the drain, as you might say, I had a chance to put those things into practice.
So meditation played an important role in your ability to go through this process and gain something from it?
Absolutely. I honestly believe I could not have acquired peace of mind and learned the elements needed for transformation without the meditation.
But you seem like a very high energy, very driven kind of person. Did meditation come easily to you? Yeah.
No, it did not come easily. In fact, it's the proverbial kicking and screaming. You know, I kept reading the books and meditation kept showing up, and it's like, oh, not that again. Don't you know that I have ADD? You know, I had to actually practice sitting still. And it was an incremental exercise for me to learn to meditate and meditate comfortably and gain the benefits from meditation. You know, and literally it started as sitting still on the couch purposefully for 30 seconds and then expanding the time frame. And it wasn't even about clearing the mind, you know, quieting my thoughts. It was really just about sitting still and making it a habitual practice.
Do you think, and I've often thought this myself in my own meditation practice for 40-something years, that what we really get out of meditation is we learn that it's not all about us. We're not that damned important, and we just learn to let it go. We're part of the process. We're here, we're breathing, we're seeing, we're experiencing, but we're not the focus of all that is. And meditation makes you let go of that inherently narcissistic worldview that is part of at least American consumer culture.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It puts the emphasis on the inside instead of the outside.
Exactly. And you realize that you're not the center, it's a process, and you're some little atom in the process somewhere.
We are a microcosm of the whole, of the all that is.
But you can accept the fact that you're not the center of
Front
everything.
and center, yes.
And that's hard for a lot of people to accept, you know.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. It may be difficult for people to accept, but here's the element of that. The resistance to the acceptance that we are not the begin-all and end-all of our lives is that by relinquishing that, we acquire this tremendous power to become co-creators for what we really want. Because we get a little more objectivity, we let go of the dramas, we start to become very clear about what is important to us, and that importance then comes into our main focus and allows our inspired action to bridge the gap.
When you write about creativity and co-creation in the book, the sense I get is that you picture something, but unlike the people with this secret, which is, a bit of a scam to me, you're going a little deeper, and you're speaking about how we go from just picturing it to making it happen, to incrementally, step by step, making it concrete.
I believe that we are powerful co-creators of our lives. I think The Secret did a lot to bring spirituality to a populace that wasn't willing or open to accept that. I won't completely refute the secret, but I think it left a lot of things out.
Mm-hmm.
It was just maybe the first step of 500. And the missing element, and I think Rhonda Byrne probably was subject to some editing at the final end of her movie, which eliminated the really juicy stuff, is that you have to be very aware of how you feel. We're vibratory creatures. Our feelings are the language of that vibration. So if we're aware of how we are feeling at any point in time, and really there are only two versions of emotions that human beings perceive, love, fear. If you're aware of where you are on that vibratory scale, you can know exactly what you're creating in your life.
Do you think that the self-empowerment of visualizing, holding a vision and trying to actualize it and bring it into concretion, that act of self-empowerment is an existential rebellion against fear and against the conditions? It's a refutation of the conditions that would otherwise bring about fear and despair.
I would say yes, but I would say let's break it down and make it more elementary from that. I am not a highly visual person. In my meditations I can be, but in reality I'm an auditory artist, so my greatest imprinting comes through sound. And I even explained a clairaudient experience I had that was very transcendental. But I think what has to happen is, this is where I really got tripped up on the secret, because I was convinced that I had to envision it, and if I couldn't envision it, it couldn't happen. So I really lost faith in the law of attraction. What I think is valuable, you can get some sort of vision, but you can also play a little game I call standing on the field of possibility. And the beauty of standing on the field of possibility is that you hold the feeling that you would like to have, whatever that is. And you don't have to feel the feeling. You just have to know what the feeling is. For me, the feeling was acquiring peace around my life. That's all I wanted. And at certain times, we've had experiences, hopefully, by the time you get to 50 years old, you've had some experiences giving you peace. You can recall what that feeling was by reliving that experience. And then by standing on the
field... You can ground yourself in that experience.
Exactly. And then by standing on the field of possibility, allow for it to show up as something completely unexpected, different than you could have ever imagined.
Don't you think that what you went through was a microcosm also of what this whole generation of baby boomers are facing? We grew up in a world where parents had jobs, they had pension plans to look forward to, they had some sort of security, some sort of certainty that if you showed up, did a good job, your job wasn't going to be exported to Bangladesh, and you would get to retire, and your life would at some point be comfortable. And we're all having to learn to cope with, or most of us are, with living without comfort, or having to find comfort in other ways. And when you speak of being centered in that experience, being in that place where you can remember what it is to feel whole, you're learning to do that in the middle of this swirling chaos of losing a business. And I remember where you wrote, and it really impressed me, like a few other passages in the book, about at the end of all these losses, you looked around and you and Michael talked, your husband spoke to each other and said, we're actually rich. Speak to that a little bit, I think that's a wonderful insight.
Well, what I was gaining the acute awareness of is that we create our future.